You won't believe it, darling. There's long-time listeners and first-time callers. They love Maria. That's what they keep saying. And we're going.
I'm an edge of the chair guy.
You're welcome, and thank you so much for joining us. This is live TV like it was intended, as it was invented, and we're just having the time of our lives. We're so grateful that you're joining us. Please feel free to spread the word. We have been a work in progress. We're still tinkering with the product, but we're really proud of our website and the interactivity. You can go on there to see what we've done in our broadcasts in the past. We've actually been broadcasting since August of this year, but we didn't go live until 3 weeks ago. So here you are. It is Tuesday, November 16th, and we're in studio now with Gene Valentino. Gene is a resident here in Ventura County.
Yes.
And you have had such a career that I wanted to let our listeners get to know what kind of history we have in you and with you, and how wonderful it is that you're here to tell your story.
You know, Maria, it's almost disconcerting sometimes because I've worn so many hats. I think I need 10 heads to wear them all.
And
But
the voice.
yeah,
I mean, the voice. So talk to us. You started in radio.
I started in radio and got into it. This would make a terrific sitcom. I got into radio, and you'll never believe it, by accident. I was minding my own business. I always enjoy starting a story that way. I was minding my own business in Waterbury, Connecticut, and the year was 1944. Now, how I could be 48 years old, I haven't figured that out. But anyway.
When you figure that math out, you let me know. That's better than new math.
There
That's
I was.
Gene's math. But hey, Rod, can you show a picture of Gene in his radio days while we're talking a little bit, please? There you go.
Oh,
Look at that handsome man.
that was me when I was at WATR in Waterbury, Connecticut. But you'll enjoy this, Maria, if you'll allow me. It won't be long. But I was in Waterbury working in the Chase office. I was a purveyor, which during the war, that meant you go chasing around to see what's holding orders up and you push them out and so forth.
Orders of what?
Orders of brass goods. Waterbury was the brass center of the world.
Okay.
And they
I didn't
also
know
have a lot of clocks. Lux Clock was
Yes.
there, Ingraham Clock, and Seth Thomas Clock was in Thomaston. And then there was Timex, which was the Waterbury clock shop. Then they moved to Middlebury outside of town, and they became Timex, U.S. Time Corporation. Timex was one of the brands. But anyway, I was in industry. Oh, and I was successful. I was at the top of the world because in the brass center of the world, when you get ahead and you reach the top, what have you done? You get into industry. Not only that, but I was behind a desk. And my father, he came 30 years before as an immigrant, and he wasn't behind any desk. But anyway, there I was in Waterbury doing well, and I was with this friend of mine who aspired to theatrics. And he said to me, Gene, why don't you get into the Civic Theater? It was the local theater group. I frowned. I said, well, I don't know anything about theater work. And then he told me the selling point. He says, you meet some beautiful girls. I said, that's for me. So, Maria, I got right into it, and this will have you falling off the chair. He said to me, he says, now you have to go for an audition. I says, fine. He said, but let me find out the director. Well, to shorten the story, it so happened that the director of the Civic Theater was doing that part-time. He was really the full-time director of a local radio station.
Really?
So he said, you have to go up to the radio station for an audition. Well, all right. You know, I listened to the radio, and I loved the news, and I loved the big bands, but I had no aspirations about being in radio, not in 1944. So we went up to the radio station, and it so happened that this was October, and he was getting ready to go into the service. somebody else.
The director.
The director. So he was auditioning people. So he came running by and he says, okay, he says, what's your name? I said, Valentino. He says, okay, go in that studio, pick up, you'll see some news and commercials, read it over. When the light goes on, read it. And so I says, oh. So I looked at Charlie.
Opinion.
I says, news, commercials? I said, I thought it was the theater. Charlie says, keep your mouth shut. He says, I think he's got things confused. So I went into the studio. This I'll never forget. I went into the studio, Maria, and I auditioned. I read the news and everything. I got through. He came out and says, well, look, Valentino, he says, you're kind of rough in spots, but you've got a good voice. Oh, he says, so look, come in 2 weeks.
Come in 2 weeks?
Yeah, in 2 weeks from now, come in, and you'll have the night shift part-time, Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday from 6 to 11, and that meant just taking station breaks between the network programs. So I went home, and I did the dumbest thing of my life. I shrugged my shoulders. I said, if it's that easy, how can this business be worth anything? Maria, I didn't go back. But I started listening to the stations. And I started hearing about New York announcers. Waterbury was only 80 miles from New York. And the announcers in New York were making money and everything. And I said, and one fellow said, you're crazy. He says, there's a waiting line to get in there. So I went down to the studio.
The same one?
Yeah, the same studio.
But in the meantime, is that guy upset with you?
He's gone.
He's already gone? Okay.
He's in the Army.
Okay.
And so somebody took over. And I said, I said, Mr. Lynch, my name is Valentino. I said, and he says, weren't you supposed to be here 2 weeks ago? I says, well, yeah, I was waiting. Dumbest. I said, I was waiting for you to call me. He says, we don't call anybody. You were hired. He says, we got somebody else. Oh, well then, I got sick. I said, my gods. So he said, look, why don't you go across the street, the other station, WATR. He said, I think they may have the same need we have. Somebody's going in the Army. Well, anyway, to shorten the story, I went across the street, took an audition, and I got the job.
And what was that job?
Night announcer.
Okay.
See, I did station breaks.
Let our viewers know what that means, because radio has changed so much in the years that they would carry programming, and then at the breaks you would come in with...
Yes.
You would read the commercials and read the news?
Yes. You see, networks made up the bulk of programming at the time. And they did a half-hour program. It was never half hours, 29 minutes and a half. And then you had 30 seconds for what we call a station break. So there was 5 or 10 seconds for the break. And the other 20 seconds was what we call a short commercial, and it was 20 seconds. We read it, and then we'd get right back into the network, give a station ID, and the network would pick it up again. And that was the essence of programming. So I did that for about a year or 2 years.
What was the format at that station?
Well, the format at that station, like most network stations, they were an ABC outlet.
Okay.
So they carried the American Broadcasting Company programming, and it was all...
was it theater kind of things?
No, they had Dark Venture, The Shadow.
Oh, but so it was
dramatics and so forth.
Word spoken theater.
Yeah.
Like our soap operas are. That
Exactly.
was the originate. I'm just trying to let people know if there's a generational difference here.
Yeah.
That the soap operas that we see today on television, they're the genesis was that it came from radio, spoken, and there was some sound effects, but it was a cast that was interacting as a play, but it was live.
Well, you're right. You're absolutely right, and I commend you for the knowledge, because I don't think you're in my age. But anyway, so most of it and all of it were soap operas, but a lot of news. And remember, the big thing then, though, Maria, is that there was just radio.
Right.
There was nothing else.
Right, good point. There's no competition.
There was no TV, no FM, nothing, no internets. Nobody knew what it was. But the only thing you could do is go out to a movie. So this was 1944. Within, I guess, I started working full time, I guess after about 6 months.
Wow, nice.
Yeah, and I quit the day job. They were going to fire me anyway. So because I was devoting all of my time to radio.
So
And,
not only did you get hired in radio, it became a passion, it sounds like.
oh, I loved it.
Yeah, there
I
you go.
loved
We're
it.
going to take a quick break because we've run out of time. And when we come back, we're visiting with Gene Valentino. I'm a radio dog, so I know what he's talking about in terms of passion. And that's kind of what this program has become, is it's radio with pictures. Because of us being live, there is no second take, there is no safety net. What you see is what you get. So that's why we also call this the real reality show. You're watching the Maria Sanchez Show on KADYTV.com. We'll be right back.
Maria's talking, so call Maria. Her show is killer. You won't believe it, darling. There's long-time listeners and first-time callers. They love Maria. That's why they keep saying, and we're gonna get loud, but we're gonna get close. She's here and she's going strong. Maria Sanchez, this is a show, darling. She'll give you something to talk about.
Welcome back to the Maria Sanchez Show. We're live. It's Tuesday, November 16th, and we're broadcasting from our studios in the beautiful Ventura Executive Suites in downtown Ventura. We would like you to contact us if there's an event going on that you'd like to help us promote, something we need to know. We're going to start forming a community calendar so that you can log on to the website and see what's going on, what you might want to do. We're happy to promote whatever we can. We're trying to feature a 501c3, a nonprofit in the county every day. So we're a work in progress is what I say. So if you go on our website, which you're watching this on the website, contact us, let us know what's be happening, and you can also watch the archives as well. Thursday, 2 days from today, we will be broadcasting from the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library because President George W. Bush is coming into Ventura County. We will be simulcasting his speech. We're going to start our pre-show at 5:30. And then we'll go live with him at 6 o'clock, and you can watch it right here at KADYTV.com. And on Friday, we're going to be broadcasting live from the Crown Plaza Hotel, the Resource Development RDC, Resource Development Collaborative, I think it's called. It's all about water. We had Marty Melvin in to promote it. Harold Edwards, who is the CEO of Limonera, is giving the keynote speech. We will be broadcasting that live. That was also open to the public. There may still be seats available, and it was complimentary. So you can look up RDC Ventura, and then maybe you could find out what more details about that. And last night we were at Cal State University Channel Islands for the Hank L. Lacayo Institute launch. So we've been busy, but that's because Ventura County is busy. And speaking of busy, we have Gene Valentino in studios with us. Gene is a Ventura County resident, but you cut your teeth, well, there you go. Cut your teeth. We may use these a little bit, but I just wanted you to have them in case we do need them, because we have some pictures that we're going to show on the screen now. But Gene, you said that you started in radio. You started by accident. You found your passion. And then what?
Well, I continued in broadcasting in Waterbury, Connecticut, and I stayed in Waterbury until the 1970s. And it was in 1970 that I had married in the interim and had 4 children, had no desire to go out of town, even though New York was an hour and a half away. But in 1970, my marital status changed. Regretfully, and the children, I put them in prep school, and I went off to Washington, and I joined the Mutual Broadcasting System, and I became a correspondent and an anchorman in Washington, and it was so eventful because it was right at Watergate just unfolded the year after, and so much was going on. Maria, you doing interviews as well as you do, you would have been in heaven there at that time. But there were all of the characters there that you read in the news, and of course Richard Nixon, and then from
Did you ever meet Catherine Graham?
Catherine, I saw her from a distance. Yes. Ben Bradley, I did.
Did you?
Ben Bradley was her assistant, who well, not her assistant. He was actually the editor of the paper.
Right.
And he married the Quinn girl.
Yes.
Who is still very prominently involved, Sally Quinn.
So you were doing what with Mutual?
I was an anchor man, but we had on the air at the time, this is funny, fate is strange. One of the commentators on the Mutual Network was Fulton Lewis Jr., and he was a great commentator with the great names, and I used to listen to him when I was at WATR in Waterbury, Connecticut, and his commentaries would come into the studio, and I'd say, wow, boy, this man is something. When I was at Mutual, Fulton Lewis would take 2 or 3 weeks off to go out on the road, and the news director picked me to substitute for him.
Oh, my.
Here I was sitting in a studio, substituting, doing the commentaries of a fellow of whom I used to sit in awe and everything. But I must say this.
What an honor.
It was great, and I got such credentials from it because I was a newsman. And so I went on the first time, and the news director said, well, what are you doing, reading the news? I says, well, yeah. I says, I try not to make it opinionated. Oh, he says, we want your opinion. We don't want news.
Really?
So I said, whoa. I says, well, let me get going. The next day, I gave them my opinion, which at turbulent times was center. I was a true moderate in those days, and halfway between the left and halfway between the right. And they were tumultuous with all the people on the Hill. Barry Goldwater was a senator from Arizona, and he had a young governor. He was from California. He was nursing along, and who eventually became president, Ronald Reagan. But these were the times when Ronald Reagan was recording large tapes, and he was on the road for General Electric, these large tapes that were distributed for TV stations around the country, which was a forerunner to his candidacy in 80. Yeah, I think it was 1980,
Sounds right.
Years to come. But in any event, I was privy to all of that, including all of the stuff on the Hill, Capitol Hill. Now, I was not assigned to Capitol Hill. I was economics affairs correspondent.
For Mutual Broadcasting?
For Mutual.
Okay.
And I covered the economic world. And I turned out a 3-part series. And in 1975, with William E. Simon, then Secretary of the Treasury, with William E. Simon, I turned out this 3-part series on the economy in 1975. Now, why am I lingering on that here in 2010? That's on my website now, and it's on my home page. I checked it out the other day. Maria, so help me, it parallels everything we're doing now.
Really?
The greatest instructive moment I had was listening to, they were 15-minute programs, but minus the commercials came to about 11 minutes. Each was 11 minutes. And I still listened to them and listened to Simon talking about the economy and the recovery and the deficit spending.
Really?
It's 2010.
So it's pertinent today? That's what you're saying? That
So pertinent.
So they say that history repeats itself and we learn from history. So are you saying that if you direct us to your website today that we might actually have some hope?
Indeed. You know what they say, who fails to learn from the lessons of history is doomed to repeat them. I'm only quoting.
Yeah.
But that's the substance of that economic series I did. Well, from there, I went up to New York in 1976, 77. And I went up to New York and I covered the United Nations for NBC radio, not TV. I covered the United Nations as a stringer. And
No, you're using words that people don't know what that means. So your beat was the United Nations, which means that was what your focus was. When you mean stringer, that means they pay you as you give a piece. So in other words, that you're not on salary.
Yeah, right. I was
Whenever
not.
you file a report, then you get paid for that report.
Yes, I did not work full-time as a full-time employee for NBC. I was not on their payroll. But I put in more time sometimes than a full-time.
I bet you did.
But I paid. See, we went out, as Maria alluded correctly to, the fact that I do my own pieces and my own news pieces, and then I submit it to the main office at 40 Rockefeller Plaza, which was maybe 6 blocks from the UN. And we'd submit it there, and they would decide whether they'd use it or not, and I would get paid on the basis of what they used. Well, things were so hot at the UN that, Maria, they used everything. They used every kit in the caboodle. And there were some things at the UN, it's not all historical, because you've got, and I say this with respect to the audience, of course, that you have some people who are at the UN who are almost clowns, and so some silly things happened.
Before you go into that, because we're going to take a break, and on our final segment, I want to discuss with you what that meant for you to cover the UN, what kind of access you had, what kind of things you found out that you could or could not report. Because in those days, there was discretion. Like they say about President Kennedy with his affairs, that people who knew didn't say because it was nobody's business, and that sort of thing. So it's different than now, which you have TMZ and paparazzi and all that. The more the dirt, the better. So we're going to get into what journalism must have been like in the day when there were ethics, if you will. Our in-studio guest is Jean Valentino. I'm Maria Sanchez. We're going to take a very quick break, and we'll be right back. Thank you for joining us.
Maria's talking, so call Maria, her show is killer. You won't believe it, darling, there's long-time listeners and first-time callers. They love Maria, that's why they keep saying, and we're gonna get loud, but we're gonna get close. She's here and she's going strong. Maria Sanchez, this is a show, darling. She'll give you something to talk about.
Welcome back to the best little kept secret in Ventura County, and that's because we've been traveling under the radar. But if you're watching us, that means that you can count yourself as one of the beginning ones. We're getting the word out probably later this month. As we've been tinkering with our system, we want to deliver you the best that technology will provide. And as you know, technology unfolds rapidly, so we're staying on top of it. We used to say we're ahead of the curve. Now we're saying we're in front of the curve, because internet television is ultimately where it's going to be at, just like when cable came about with regular broadcast television. And speaking of the media and things unfolding quickly, we have a legend and just somebody who's a resource beyond belief here in Ventura County, and he's in studio with us, Jean Valentino. He's been regaling us with stories of what it was like to cut his teeth as a young buck in the business, and what the business was like, and actually what it is like now. We're going to let Jean finish his story about his time as a UN reporter for NBC Radio, and then we have some snapshots that we've taken or that we've borrowed from your website to share with you that are going through bits of your career as well. So Jean, again, thank you for taking the time.
Well, Maria, I hope you'll forgive me, because this is the most unusual thing I've ever done on there. But will you please invite me back?
Yes, of course.
Because I've got some things I want to tell you. I think I tell you, they're incredible. And I have no compunctions whatsoever of telling you that if you say I don't believe it, I accept that. I accept it if you don't believe it. Now, you want to know what that is?
So the reason he's saying that is because during the break he said, I'm going to tell a story about how I almost stopped.
I almost stopped the war. Now, isn't that a ridiculous... The Falkland Islands War. Now, isn't that that's absurd to have somebody come on a program and make a statement, I almost stopped the war.
We've checked him out. It's there.
Well,
so tell us.
Briefly, the Falkland Island War were, first, if you know about the Falkland Islands, they're, 1,800 people and 300,000 sheep.
Okay.
They have to get all their supplies and everything from the mainland, which is Argentina. The Falkland Islands, historically, were under Spain, when Spain owned South America and Argentina, and they were called Les Malvinas. The Argentines, now when Captain Cook came through South Atlantic and having plundered much of some of the Pacific and so forth, he took the Falkland Islands in the name of England, and Spain was very disoriented and whatnot, and they said nothing. But the Argentines always said, "Les Malvinas son Argentinas." The Malvinas, which I mean the Falkland Islands, even to this day.
Are ours.
Yeah, they are Les Malvinas son Argentinas. So, anyway, they had that in the back of their mind. Now, at that time, Jeane Kirkpatrick was our delegate at the UN. And they were announcing at the UN about, they were concerned with, of course, the Israeli conflict in the Middle East. Suddenly, somebody comes up from one of the South American delegations and says, "We have a problem. There are massed troops in El Salvador ready to march into Nicaragua." And they said they were U.S. troops. They were not. But they were U.S. supported. And the troops were Peruvian and Argentines. So they called off the whole thing, put them back on ships, planes. Peruvians went home to Lima, and the Argentines, supposedly to Argentina, Buenos Aires. But they only stopped in Buenos Aires to refuel, because the triumvirate, which is a dictatorship they had down there, three top people, decided, we're armed to the teeth, let's go in and take the Malvinas. And they invaded the Falkland Islands. That was the scenario behind it. Well, anyway, they negotiated. I have to shorten this up. I think your time is running. So they invaded the Falkland Islands, and they took it. Margaret Thatcher called up Ronald Reagan, president, and said, get those guys out of there. Reagan, with General Haig, was Secretary of State. He contacted his counterpart in Argentina, and they said, hold everything up. Meantime, the warships are going down. So they were negotiating a peace. So I was thinking, in that period of time, they're negotiating a peace. I went to the library at the UN, extensive, and I checked out about the area of Indonesia when they broke away from the Dutch. And the key was dual citizenship. So with the, not the Argentine ambassador, whom I became very friendly with, because his antecedents were from Italy as mine were. Rocco was his name, last name. So we cooked up a presentation for the General Assembly to negotiate a peace on the basis of give Argentina its sovereignty and give the 1,800 Brits on the island dual citizenship so they would not be affected. They presented to the different people, and while negotiations were going on, then they broke off. Then all of a sudden they called the negotiations on again because of the presentation we made. And I had the head of Zaire, Kamumba H. Kamonga. He did it. He presented the manifesto.
How does an NBC stringer get involved with international relations?
I used to get involved with. I couldn't take the news without getting behind it. I had to get to the bottom of it. But you have to remember, I was a stringer because there's something called the Logan Act, which I covered myself because I contacted people at the State Department and had it cleared. But anyway, we put this through. They were going to call a complete peace, the Valentino. The General Beltrano was a ship carrying wounded. Somebody torpedoed the ship. Then they decided to shoot a couple of aircraft. Why can't I think of helicopters? And Prince Andrew was on one of them. Margaret Thatcher was up in the air, and she said, all talks off. Yeah. It's surrender at all cost. And they took the Falkland Islands back.
Wow. So that's just one snippet that we have with Jeane Valentino in studio. So yes, we'll continue a conversation at another time. But before we run out of time, let's, Rod, put some pictures up that we can look at and have Jeane comment on what it is that we're looking at.
Oh, that's Danny Kaye in the middle.
Okay.
And I was the manager of a radio station in New Haven. And that's the Army Award to the station by Captain Pandolino. Danny Kaye was appearing at Oakdale, which is the musical theater, summer outdoor theater in the New Haven area. And they brought him in. And that was the picture we had of him that day. And he presented the award, and he presented it to me only because, you don't know who that is, but that's Erskine Hawkins, the great band leader who wrote the song Tuxedo Junction. Well, he was appearing at the Lowe's Poli Theater in Waterbury, Connecticut, and I interviewed him downstairs before he went on with his band.
I love it that you have these pictures. And I'm sorry to rush you, but I want to make sure we get through them.
1951, they decided to get General Eisenhower and have him run for president. He had been Columbia University president for about 2 or 3 years. And they started a We Like Ike program, and I was on that committee. And that's one of my MC shows in my younger days, when I looked thinner and better. And this was a hunting and fishing program I did at WATR in my first 2 or 3 months. And I did all the political aspects of it, and with it, in conjunction with all of these officials from the state. That's what we put on, Hunting and Fishing News. And I wrote a newspaper column in conjunction with it. And after writing the column and doing the program, for 2 years, I went fishing for the first time.
Oh, dear Lord. And I think this is our last one.
The big flood took place in Waterbury, Connecticut, and central Connecticut in 1956 or 57. And that was a picture with the Army National Guard was taking us down through the valley there where houses were inundated. And it was a massive flood that caused so much destruction from the northern boundary of Connecticut all the way down to Long Island Shore, which is the altitude of the state of Connecticut. The whole Naugatuck River and the Mad River flooded, houses inundated, big 3-story houses, Maria, floating down the street. It was a sight I will never forget. But I didn't tell you about the biggest thrill of my life.
Can you be short? Or else you have to come back, because we're done.
Brotherhood in Action. Remind me about that.
Brotherhood in Action. We'll leave it hangling with that dangling participle. And how blessed we've been to be able to share history with you. And your memory is beyond compare. I'm just like blown away. I'm just looking at you thinking you're pulling dates and names out like it was just yesterday. So Gene Valentino has been our in-studio guest. Later on tonight, we will have the footage from last night's dedication at the Hank L. Lacayo Institute at Cal State University Channel Islands. And we look forward to seeing you tomorrow live at 4 o'clock on the Maria Sanchez Show right here at KADYTV.com.
Maria's talking, so call Maria. Her show is killer.